I helped my girlfriend get a job at my company. 2 months later, I got called into HR. She filed a harassment report against me to take my position. When I confronted her, she said, "It's nothing personal. I just saw an opportunity." I didn't say a word. I let the investigation finish. This morning, she's locked out of the system. 47 missed calls and counting. I don't even know where to begin with this mess. I guess I'll start with the basics. I'm 32, male, been working at a mid-sized tech company in Seattle for about 4 years now. I started as a developer and worked my way up to lead software architect for our main product. The job pays well, has good benefits, and most importantly, I genuinely enjoy the work and the team I've built around me. About a year ago, I met Olivia, 29F, at a friend's housewarming party. We hit it off immediately. She was smart, ambitious, and we seemed to share the same values. She worked in tech too, but at a smaller startup that was struggling financially. We started dating, and things moved pretty quickly. By month 3, she had moved into my apartment, and we were talking about long-term plans. Around 6 months into our relationship, Olivia's company went through a round of layoffs, and she was let go. She was devastated, not just about losing her job, but about how it happened. No warning, just a Friday afternoon Zoom call, and that was it. The tech industry can be brutal that way. For 2 weeks, she applied to jobs with little success. The market had tightened, and positions that would have had 20 applicants a year ago now had hundreds. Watching her confidence erode day by day was heartbreaking. Then, as luck would have it, a junior developer position opened up on a different team at my company. It wasn't at her previous level. She'd been a mid-level developer at her startup, but it was a foot in the door at a stable company. I hesitated at first. I've always been wary of mixing my personal and professional lives, but Olivia was getting desperate, and I truly believed in her skills. I put in a good word with the hiring manager, Meredith, who's an old friend. I made it clear that Olivia should be evaluated on her own merits, but my recommendation definitely helped her get the initial interview. She did the rest herself, acing the technical assessment and impressing in her interviews. 2 weeks later, she got the offer. I was thrilled for her, and those first few weeks seemed perfect. We'd commute together, have lunch when our schedules aligned, and she seemed grateful for the opportunity. She was smart about maintaining professionalism at work. No excessive PDA, no special treatment expected. If anything, she worked harder than necessary to prove she deserved to be there regardless of our relationship. Then, about 2 months in, things started to change subtly. Olivia began staying late at the office, saying she wanted to impress her team lead. She started getting invited to meetings with upper management, unusual for her position, but I figured she was just making a good impression. She asked more questions about my projects, wanting to understand the architecture decisions and business logic beyond what her role required. I found it endearing at the time, thinking she was just excited to learn. What an idiot I was. Last Monday, I got called into a meeting with HR and our department VP. My stomach dropped as soon as I saw their faces. HR doesn't schedule same-day meetings for good news. They explained that a harassment complaint had been filed against me by a female employee. They couldn't reveal who, citing confidentiality, but the allegations were serious. Using my position to pressure a subordinate into a relationship, making them feel their job security depended on maintaining personal relations with me, and creating a hostile work environment. I was floored. I've always been meticulously professional, especially since taking on leadership responsibilities. I couldn't think of a single interaction that could have been misconstrued this way. When I asked for specifics about the alleged incidents, they said they couldn't share details during an active investigation, but that I would be temporarily reassigned to work remotely on a different project while they sorted things out. Walking back to my desk to collect my things, I felt like everyone was staring at me. 4 years of reputation, potentially ruined by accusations I couldn't even defend against yet. I packed up quietly and left, shell-shocked. That evening, Olivia came home later than usual. She was different, energetic, almost giddy. She barely asked about my day, instead launching into a story about how she'd been pulled into a meeting with the CTO to discuss some ideas she had. I sat there, numb, as she talked, and suddenly everything clicked into place. "Did you file a harassment complaint against me?" I asked, interrupting her mid-sentence. The way her expression changed told me everything before she even spoke. First surprise, then instant defensiveness. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her tone suddenly cold. Why would you accuse me of something like that? Because I was called into HR today about a harassment claim from a female employee, and it's pretty coincidental that you're suddenly getting pulled into high-level meetings. She maintained her innocent expression, but I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. That's ridiculous, Nolan. Maybe someone else reported you. Have you considered that you might have actually made someone uncomfortable? In 4 years, I've never had a single complaint. Then suddenly, 2 months after you start, this happens? She switched tactics, tears welling up in her eyes. I can't believe you don't trust me. After everything we've been through. She moved toward me like she was going to embrace me, but I stepped back. Stop. Just stop. I know it was you. Her demeanor changed instantly, the tears vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. She studied me for a moment, then sighed. You know what? Fine. It doesn't matter anyway. It's done. Why? I asked, still struggling to understand. I got you this job. I vouched for you. And I appreciate the foot in the door, she said with a shrug, but I was never going to advance quickly enough from a junior position. Your role, on the other hand, she trailed off. So this was always the plan? Get in through me, then get rid of me? Not from the beginning, she said, and I could tell this was the closest to honesty she'd been. But once I saw how things worked there, how the leadership structure operated, how decisions were made, I realized I'd never move up fast enough the conventional way. What about us? Our relationship? She looked at me with something resembling pity. Nolan, we wanted different things. You were content with your position, your steady progress. I need more, faster. And honestly, she hesitated, then continued with brutal frankness. The passion wasn't there anymore, hasn't been for months. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not just that she'd betray me professionally, but that our entire relationship had apparently meant so little to her. And you thought filing false harassment claims was easier than just breaking up with me? Breaking up wouldn't have solved my professional situation, she said simply. And I have evidence, by the way. All those times you messaged me about work, the late-night emails about projects, it all looks different in the right context. HR always sides with the accuser initially. By the time they sort through everything, I'll have proven myself in the role. I didn't yell. I didn't throw things. I just looked at her and said, pack your things. You have until tomorrow evening to find somewhere else to stay. She crossed her arms. This is my apartment too. My name is on the lease. Then I'll leave. But we're done, Olivia, completely done. You're overreacting, she said, but I could tell by her expression that she knew this wasn't something she could manipulate her way out of. Fine, I'll get my essential stuff tonight and come back for the rest later. She grabbed some clothes and toiletries, all while acting like I was the one being unreasonable. Before she left, she turned to me one last time. You know, this wouldn't have been necessary if you'd just helped me advance normally. You could have recommended me for team lead positions, put my name forward for projects, but you were always so concerned about conflict of interest and earning your way. Some of us don't have the luxury of waiting years to be recognized. With that parting shot, she left. I stood there in our suddenly empty apartment, trying to process how the woman I thought I knew could justify something so calculating. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking about every conversation we'd had about work, every document she might have seen on my laptop, every architecture discussion where I'd explained critical systems to her. Then I remembered something crucial, something that gave me a sliver of hope. I'm meticulous about documentation and communication. I keep records of everything, partly because it's good practice in software development, partly because I've always been detail-oriented to a fault. I have logs, emails, recorded meetings with consent banners, and detailed notes from every significant work interaction. The next morning, instead of fighting the investigation or trying to plead my case prematurely, I sent HR a simple email. I understand you need to investigate these claims thoroughly. I am fully cooperating and have complete confidence the truth will emerge. Please let me know if you need any additional information from me. Then I started pulling together my evidence. I created a timeline of every interaction I'd had with Olivia at work, all in public spaces or group settings. I gathered witnesses who could attest to our professional behavior. I collected text messages showing the progression of our relationship well before she joined the company, proving we were already living together when she was hired. I had dozens of photos of us together, at events, trips, and family gatherings, establishing a clear timeline that contradicted her claims. Most importantly, I dug up the digital trail. Remember those architecture discussions where I'd explained systems to her? They weren't casual pillow talk. They were recorded team meetings she'd asked to join to learn more about the overall product. Her questions weren't innocent curiosity. They were targeted information gathering, evidenced by her notes that someone from her team had shared with me months ago, thinking I'd be proud of her initiative. I also found emails where she'd specifically asked me for work advice, time-stamped from evenings or weekends, clear evidence that I wasn't forcing work discussions on her. She had initiated many of these conversations herself. I even had our original dating app conversations from a year ago, proving we met well before she joined the company. I didn't confront her again. I didn't rant on social media or try to rally colleagues against her. I simply provided HR with organized, factual information and let the investigation run its course. Meanwhile, I focused on the temporary project I'd been assigned, determined to show my value to the company regardless of the circumstances. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing concrete. Olivia had moved most of her things out while I was working from a coffee shop. From occasional texts with coworkers, I heard rumors that she'd been joining leadership meetings and presenting ideas suspiciously similar to ones I'd discussed in our architecture sessions. Then yesterday afternoon, I got a call from the VP and head of HR asking me to come in for a meeting this morning at 8 a.m. They wouldn't give details over the phone, but there was a different tone to their voices. Less stern, more apologetic. I arrived early, professionally dressed, calm despite my racing heart. The meeting was brief but decisive. Their investigation had found no evidence supporting the harassment claims. In fact, they'd uncovered substantial evidence that the complaint was filed maliciously, with intent to manipulate staffing for personal gain. "We owe you an apology," the VP said, looking genuinely remorseful. "We had to take the allegations seriously, but we should have handled it better. Your position is reinstated effective immediately, with appropriate compensation for the disruption." HR explained that they couldn't share specific actions taken against the employee who filed the false report, still maintaining confidentiality, though we all knew who they meant, but assured me that company policy on false accusations was being strictly enforced. I thanked them, accepted their apology, and headed to my desk, my real desk, with my team nearby. As I logged into my computer, a company-wide email arrived announcing some organizational changes. My name was there, officially reinstated as lead architect, along with a new initiative I'd be heading. Olivia's name was nowhere to be found. Within minutes, my phone started buzzing. First a text from Olivia. "What did you do?" Then another. "My badge isn't working." Then calls, one after another, growing increasingly frantic. By midday, I'd received 47 missed calls from her, dozens of texts, ranging from confused to angry to pleading. I haven't responded to any of them. From what I've gathered through the office grapevine, this morning Olivia arrived to find her access revoked. When she tried to contact her manager, she was directed to HR, who informed her that her employment had been terminated due to violation of company ethics policies and making false claims against another employee. Apparently, she didn't go quietly. Security had to escort her out as she demanded to speak to the CTO, insisting there had been a mistake. According to the receptionist, she was still standing outside the building 2 hours later, alternating between calling me and trying to get other employees to let her in as they passed. The strangest part? I don't feel the satisfaction I expected. Mostly, I feel tired and sad that someone I trusted could be so calculating. But I also feel relieved that I kept my cool and let the system work the way it's supposed to. I've blocked her number now, and I'm staying with a friend for a few days in case she shows up at my apartment. The locks are already changed. Turns out, I can be calculating too when necessary. I guess the lesson here is document everything, trust your instincts, and remember that sometimes the best revenge isn't some elaborate scheme. It's simply letting someone's own actions catch up with them. Update 1 week later. First, I want to thank everyone for the overwhelming support on my original post. I wasn't expecting that level of response, and reading your comments helped me feel less alone during a pretty dark time. It's been a week since everything went down, and I promised some of you an update, so here it is. The aftermath has been intense. After blocking Olivia's number, she found increasingly creative ways to try contacting me. Emails from new addresses, messages through mutual friends, even a handwritten letter slipped under my friend's door. How she found that address, I have no idea, and it's more than a little concerning. Her messages followed a predictable pattern. First, angry accusations, "You set me up." Then minimizing what she did, "It was just a small lie that got out of hand." Then self-pity. "My career is ruined because of you." And finally, desperate pleas. "Please just talk to me, I can explain everything." I haven't responded to any of them. The most bizarre development came 3 days ago when she somehow got my mother's phone number and called her, sobbing about how I had misunderstood the situation and claiming we were actually engaged but having a fight. My mom, bless her, saw right through it. "If you were engaged to my son, why haven't I met you in the year you've been dating?" Olivia apparently hung up immediately. At work, things have been surprisingly positive. My team welcomed me back with what can only be described as collective relief. Turns out, during my absence, Olivia had tried implementing some changes to our architecture that would have created serious technical debt down the line. My temporary replacement had pushed back, but she'd gone over his head, claiming the changes were originally my ideas. My VP pulled me aside on my second day back and explained more about what happened behind the scenes. Apparently, Olivia's plan might have worked if not for one key miscalculation. She'd targeted the wrong person. I have a reputation as someone measured and detailed, while she was still relatively unknown. When my evidence contradicted her claims so thoroughly, they dug deeper and found some disturbing patterns. 1. She'd been selectively forwarding herself confidential emails from project discussions she wasn't supposed to have access to. 2. She'd approached several senior developers with leading questions, then presented their insights as her own in meetings with leadership. 3. Most damning of all, they found draft emails in her company account where she'd practiced her harassment narrative, refining the details to make them both believable and difficult to disprove. She'd even researched company policies about harassment complaints and saved links to articles about how to document workplace hostility. She'd forgotten that drafts are stored on company servers and that IT regularly monitors research patterns for security purposes. The VP assured me that beyond the termination, they've strengthened some security protocols and improved their investigation procedures as a result of this incident. Small comfort, but at least some good came from it. On the personal front, I've been staying at my friend's place while I sort out the apartment situation. Legally, since both our names are on the lease, it's complicated. I've spoken with the landlord, who was surprisingly understanding, and I'm either going to break the lease with a penalty or take over the full rent until it ends in 4 months. Either way, I'm not going back there to live. Too many memories, and frankly, I don't entirely trust that Olivia won't show up unannounced. Several friends who knew us as a couple have reached out. Most have been supportive after hearing what happened, but a few took her side initially, believing I must have done something to provoke such actions. One former friend actually suggested I should have stepped aside gracefully if she wanted the position that badly. Needless to say, we're no longer in contact. The most unexpected conversation came from Meredith, the hiring manager who'd given Olivia a chance, based partly on my recommendation. She took me to lunch yesterday and apologized profusely, feeling responsible for bringing Olivia into the company. I assured her the fault was entirely Olivia's. Meredith had simply evaluated a candidate who interviewed well and had the technical skills for the position. Neither of us could have predicted this outcome. "I've been in tech for 20 years, Meredith said, "and I've seen politics and backstabbing, but this was calculated on another level." She used your relationship as both a weapon and a shield. That comment has stuck with me because it's so accurate. Olivia leveraged our relationship to get inside information, then weaponized it with false harassment claims, all while assuming the relationship would somehow survive her betrayal, that I'd eventually forgive her because of our personal connection. The level of compartmentalization required for that kind of thinking is chilling. I've started seeing a therapist to work through everything. It's only been 2 sessions, but it's already helping me process the anger and confusion. The hardest part isn't the professional betrayal, it's questioning my own judgment. How did I miss the signs? Were there red flags I ignored? My therapist says this kind of second guessing is normal after betrayal, but it doesn't make it easier. One positive outcome. Yesterday, I signed a lease on a new apartment in a secured building. It's a fresh start in a different neighborhood, and I'm actually excited about it. I'm buying all new furniture too. Nothing from the old place except my personal items and professional equipment. As for Olivia, I heard through the industry grapevine that she's been reaching out to contacts, claiming she left my company due to ethical differences and is looking for new opportunities. In our relatively small tech community, however, word travels fast. 2 companies have already contacted me discreetly to verify her employment dates and ask vague questions about her departure. I've been professional, confirming only the facts without editorial comments. The truth doesn't need embellishment. The calls and messages have finally started to slow down. Yesterday, I only received 3 attempts at contact, compared to the dozens daily right after her termination. Progress, I suppose. I keep thinking about what she said that night. I need more, faster. I wonder if she still thinks it was worth it, now that she's not only lost the position she schemed for, but potentially damaged her reputation in the industry, all for a career readjustment that lasted less than 2 weeks. I'm still processing everything, but I'm starting to feel like myself again. Work has been a welcome distraction. There's something therapeutic about solving concrete problems with definitive solutions when your personal life is in chaos. Thanks again for listening. I'll post another update if anything significant happens, but for now, I'm focused on moving forward and rebuilding. The best revenge, as many of you said in comments, is living well. And that's exactly what I intend to do. 2 months later. It's been just over 2 months since my last update, and I'm finally ready to close this chapter of my life. So much has happened, and yet in some ways, it feels like I've just been quietly rebuilding while the drama burned itself out. First, the professional aftermath. I'm still at the same company, and things have actually improved significantly. The project I was leading has launched successfully, and the team dynamic is better than ever. There's something about going through a crisis together that either breaks people or bonds them. Thankfully, in our case, it was the latter. The company implemented some changes to their harassment reporting procedures. Nothing that makes legitimate reports harder to file, but additional safeguards against malicious claims. I wasn't directly involved in those decisions, but my VP mentioned that my situation had been a wake-up call about potential vulnerabilities in their processes. I've been promoted to senior architecture lead with an expanded team, partly as recognition for handling the situation professionally, and partly because, let's be honest, the company probably wanted to ensure I didn't look elsewhere after what happened. The raise and additional equity were substantial enough that I didn't argue. Now for the Olivia updates, which are both predictable and surprising. After my last post, her contact attempts finally stopped when I sent her a formal cease and desist letter through an attorney. It wasn't legally binding in the strictest sense, but it conveyed that I was documenting the harassment and prepared to take further steps if necessary. The letter also outlined exactly what I knew about her actions, the forwarded emails, the practiced narratives, everything, which I think finally made her realize there was no narrative she could spin to make herself the victim here. What I didn't expect was what came next. About 3 weeks after the cease and desist, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. It contained a single PDF file, a formal, written apology from Olivia. I was suspicious at first, thinking it might be another manipulation tactic, but as I read it, something felt different. She acknowledged everything she'd done, offered no excuses, and explicitly stated she wasn't asking for forgiveness or a response. The tone wasn't the polished, calculated Olivia I'd come to expect. It was raw and seemed genuinely remorseful. The most revealing part came near the end. I've started therapy to understand why I was willing to hurt someone I cared about for professional advancement. The therapist suggested it stems from growing up in a household where love was always conditional on achievement. That's not an excuse, but perhaps an explanation. I'm still working to understand myself. I didn't respond, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't affect me. Not enough to want any contact with her again, but enough to hope she gets the help she needs. Some wounds run deeper than we realize. As for her professional life, I heard through mutual connections that she left Seattle entirely. She's reportedly working at a startup in Austin now, at a level well below what she had at my company. I choose to believe that's a consequence of her actions, rather than evidence that she's continuing the same patterns elsewhere. Either way, it's not my concern anymore. On the personal front, I'm fully settled into my new apartment and have been slowly establishing routines that feel like me again. I've reconnected with hobbies I'd let slide during the relationship, playing guitar, weekend hiking, even took a cooking class just for the hell of it. Dating feels like a distant prospect right now. Several friends have tried setting me up, but I've been honest that I'm not ready. I'm not sworn off relationships forever or anything dramatic like that, but I need time to trust my own judgment again first. The most unexpected positive has been the strengthening of my other relationships. Friends who stood by me during the worst of this have become even closer. My parents visited last month, and the conversations we had were more open and authentic than they've been in years. Even my relationship with colleagues has evolved to something deeper than just professional courtesy. I've thought a lot about what I've learned from all this. The obvious lesson is to be cautious about mixing personal and professional lives, but that feels too simplistic. Sometimes opportunities to help people we care about are legitimate, and refusing out of fear isn't the answer either. I think the deeper lesson is about observation and boundaries. I missed signs with Olivia, not because they weren't there, but because I wasn't paying attention to patterns that contradicted the narrative I wanted to believe. And when the truth became undeniable, having clear boundaries, both personally and professionally, enabled me to respond effectively rather than reactively. The other day, I was reviewing some code from a new team member, and I found myself explaining architecture decisions in the same way I used to explain them to Olivia. There was a brief moment where the memory stung, but then I realized, my willingness to teach and share knowledge isn't the problem. That's actually one of my strengths. The problem was sharing it with someone who saw it as intelligence to exploit, rather than wisdom to respect. So I'm not changing who I am fundamentally, just being more mindful of who I share myself with. And that feels like growth rather than cynicism. For those who asked in comments on my previous updates, no, I never took legal action beyond the cease and desist. The company's response was swift and appropriate, and dragging things into a legal battle would have kept the wound open longer. Sometimes the best path forward isn't about maximum punishment, but about clean closure. I think this will be my final update on this situation. Life moves on, and while this experience will always be part of my story, it doesn't define me or my future. If there's a silver lining, it's the clarity that comes from having your trust severely tested. You learn what you value, who you are when challenged, and how resilient you can be when necessary. Thank you all again for the support, advice, and occasional tough love throughout this process. It made a difference knowing I wasn't navigating this alone. TLDR. Ex-girlfriend who tried to sabotage my career has moved across the country, sent an unexpected apology, and appears to be facing appropriate professional consequences. Meanwhile, I've been promoted, moved into a new place, and am rebuilding a life that feels authentic and secure. Sometimes the best revenge really is just moving forward.